Here is a point P. To find its x-coordinate, we drop a perpendicular from P to the x-axis. The foot of the perpendicular will give us the x-coordinate, and in this case it is 3. To find the y-coordinate, from P we drop a perpendicular to the y-axis, and the foot of the perpendicular on the y-axis will give us the y-coordinate, which in this case is 4. So we say the coordinates of P is 3 and 4. So the x-coordinate equal to 3, and the x-coordinate is also called the abscissa is also 3. Now the y-coordinate is equal to 4, and another name for the y-coordinate is ordinate. So the ordinate we say is also equal to 4. Now there's another point I want to introduce here. If I ask you what is the distance of P from the x-axis, this is the x-axis. Which line represents the distance of P from the x-axis? And you'll definitely agree it is this line. We'll call it PM. PM is the distance of P from the x-axis. And how much is it? It will be 4 units. Because it's equal to, this is 4 units. This is equal to 4. So the distance of P from the x-axis is 4 units, which is also the y-coordinate. So the y-coordinate also can be called as distance from the x-axis, which is also 4. Now if I were to ask you what is the distance of P from the y-axis, and for that you will definitely say from P you will go to the y-axis, and we call this n. This is the distance, and this distance is also equal to this distance, which is 3 units here. So this also is 3 units. So the x-coordinate is also distance from y-axis equal to 3. So the x-coordinate has got 3. It can be called in 3 names. The x-coordinate, it can be called also as abscissa. It can be also called distance from the y-axis. The y-coordinate too has got 3 names. It can be called y-coordinate, ordinate, or distance from the x-axis. So let me emphasize this point again. Distance from x-axis is the y-coordinate, and distance from y-axis is equal to the x-coordinate. The x-coordinate is also called the abscissa, and the y-coordinate is also called the ordinate. Let's take up the first point P. We know the coordinates of P. The x-coordinate is 1, because this is 1 here, and the y-coordinate is 2. Now if I were to ask you what is the distance of P from the x-axis, it will be its y-coordinate, 2. And what is the distance of P from the y-axis will be its x-coordinate, and that is 1. Now we take the next point Q. If we want to find its x-coordinate, we need to go to the x-axis, and that is -4, and the y-coordinate is 4. So if I want to find what is the distance from the x-axis, will be its y-coordinate, which is 4, and distance from the y-axis will be its x-coordinate, and distance cannot be negative, so you have to write 4. For the next point R, to find its coordinates, the x coordinate will be here, that is -5, and the y coordinate -2. Now if I want to find the distance of R from the x-axis, it will be its y coordinate, that is -2 is the y coordinate, but for distance can never be negative, so +2. And distance from the y-axis is its x coordinate, so it will be +5. Now for the S, here we have the x will be 6 and the y here will be -3. So for point S, the coordinates are 6 and -3. So distance from the x-axis will be the y coordinate, which is -3, but distance can never be negative, so you got to write +3. And distance from the y-axis will be the x coordinate, that will be 6. What is the distance from the x-axis of point A, 2 and 8? Now I need to know distance from the x-axis, and I know distance from the x-axis is equal to y coordinate. So the y coordinate in this case is 8. So the distance from the x-axis is equal to 8 units. For the next one, the distance of -4 and 3 from the y-axis. Now distance from y-axis is equal to x coordinate. What is the x coordinate here? -4, and distance cannot be negative, so the answer is +4. The distance of 0, 7 from x-axis. From x-axis, if we want to find the distance from x-axis, it's a y coordinate. And in this case, the y coordinate is 7, so the answer is +7. For the next sum, the distance from the x-axis of the point 8 - 3. Now we want to know distance from the x-axis, which is y coordinate, and the y coordinate is -3, so the distance will be +3. Distance is always positive. Now for the next one, write the coordinates of a point on the y-axis. Now the point is on y-axis. If it is on y-axis, we definitely know x is equal to 0 at a distance 5 units from the origin. So if I were just to draw this here, and it is on the y-axis, so it is somewhere on this axis here, this axis, 5 units from the origin. So it could be on the top 5 or down -5. They haven't told us this, but we know that x has to be 0 because it is on the y-axis. So the point could be 0, 5 if it is on the top, or it could be 0, -5 if it is below the axis. Before we learn this topic on reflection of points, let's revise something that we already have learned. We know the Cartesian plane is divided into 4 quadrants. The first quadrant, and all the points in the first quadrant are positive. X is positive, y is positive. For the second quadrant, the points in the second quadrant, the x coordinate will always be negative and the y coordinate will be positive. For the third quadrant, the x will be negative and the y also will be negative. For the fourth quadrant, the x will be positive and the y will be negative. Now if I have this point P, the coordinates of P will be 2, 3. And if I were to ask you what is its reflection on the x-axis, so if you reflect it on the x-axis, you will get the point here. It will be in the fourth quadrant, the reflection. It's reflection on the x-axis, so we consider this like the mirror, and the point will now come here, P, we'll put it as P dash because it's reflection, and it'll be 2, 3. But however, in the fourth quadrant, you know the X is positive and the Y is negative. So the reflection of P on the X-axis will be in the fourth quadrant, plus 2 minus 3. If I were to ask you, what is the reflection on the Y-axis? Means if it were to reflect, if the mirror was kept here, what would be the reflection on the Y-axis? So you know the reflection on the Y-axis will definitely be in the second quadrant. Yeah, we'll put this as P double dash, and it will be also 2, 3. But in the second quadrant, we know that the X is negative and Y is positive. Let's take up another example. Suppose I have this point A, and the coordinates of this point A are -6 and 4. And I want to know what will be its reflection on the X-axis. So I consider the X-axis as a mirror. So the reflection of A will definitely be in this quadrant. This was the second quadrant. The reflection of A on the X-axis will be in the third quadrant. The point will be, of course, 6 and 4. But in the third quadrant, you know it is negative, negative. So -6, -4. The question is, what is the reflection on the Y-axis? So the reflection on the Y-axis, you'll agree, would be in the first quadrant. If I were to reflect this on the Y-axis here, we will get in the first quadrant. First quadrant is positive, positive. So it would be, now 6 and 4, because it is in the first quadrant, plus 6 plus 4. We'll go ahead and practice some more sums on reflection of X-axis. Suppose we take, say, a point A. We say -3 and -2. And we want to know its reflection on the X-axis. So we need to draw. Now -3, -2, negative, it's negative, negative. So it is in the third quadrant. And if it's going to reflect on the X-axis, if the point is here in the third quadrant and it reflects on the X-axis, it will come in this quadrant, in the second quadrant. And second quadrant, you know, they are negative, positive. So here reflection will be also 3 and 2, but it will be here -2 plus -3 plus 2, because this is in the third quadrant. When you reflect on X-axis, it will come to the second quadrant. Now for the next point B, 6 minus 2. We want to know the reflection on the X-axis. So first we need to know where is this point lying, in which quadrant. It is positive, negative. So positive, negative means it must be lying in the fourth quadrant. If we want to find its reflection on the X-axis, it will definitely be in this. That means it will be in the first. First is positive, positive. So here we have now the reflection of this also will be 6 and 2, but both will be positive. Now for C, -8, +3, reflection on the X-axis. First we need to find where is this point. It is negative, positive, right? So negative, positive will be -8, +3 would be somewhere here in the second quadrant. And if I am reflecting on the X-axis, the reflection here, it will be in the third quadrant, and third quadrant is negative, negative. So the reflection will be 8, 3, negative, negative, because from the second quadrant the reflection will come on to the third quadrant. Take up another point, say we have 9, 4. The reflection on the X-axis. Now 9, 4, if I am to draw here, positive, positive will be in the first quadrant, positive, positive. And we are doing the reflection on the X-axis. So when you reflect, it will come in the fourth quadrant. And you know the fourth quadrant is positive, negative. So this would be 9 and 4. but it will be positive here and negative because it will be in the fourth quadrant. The first numbers from the first quadrant when reflected on the x-axis will come in the fourth quadrant. This is all a reflection on x-axis. For the next set of sums, we'll do reflection on the y-axis. So first we'll draw the Cartesian plane. Now 5, 4, positive, positive. So it is in the first quadrant, positive, positive. And if we were to reflect it on the y-axis, this is our y-axis. On reflection, it would come on this side. It would come in the second quadrant. And second quadrant we know is negative, positive. So reflection on y-axis, if we kept the mirror at the y-axis and see the reflection, you'll get 5, 4. But from the first quadrant, it would get reflected to the second quadrant, which means it will be negative, positive. For the next one, q minus 1 minus 3. So first look out where is minus minus. Minus minus is in the third quadrant, negative, negative. And now we are reflecting, so this is in the third quadrant, I'll just write it out. And we are reflecting it on the y-axis. We want to find its reflection on the y-axis. So this is my y-axis, and if I were to reflect, it will come in the fourth quadrant. And fourth quadrant we know is positive, negative. So this would be now 1 and 3, but it would be positive and negative because it is in the fourth quadrant. Now for the next one, positive r, it is positive, negative. Now let's see where is positive, negative. So positive x and negative y is in the fourth quadrant. Positive, negative. And if you reflect it on the y-axis, it will reflect and come to the third quadrant. And third quadrant we know is negative, negative. So when this is now in the fourth quadrant, and on reflection on the y-axis, it will come in the third quadrant, and we know in the third quadrant is negative, negative, which means 7, 1. Now for the last one, minus 2 plus 9. So negative, positive, which quadrant would that come? Minus 2 plus 9, and that would be in the second quadrant. Second quadrant is negative, positive. So this is in the second quadrant. And when you reflect it on the y-axis, here is your y-axis. When you reflect it, it will come to the first quadrant. So, and in the first quadrant, you know, both are positive. So positive 9, positive 2, positive 9 would be its reflection on the y-axis.